How you doing? Thanks for tuning into today's video. It's pretty stoked to talk about this subject, and I hope that it goes well with the video. And so today I'm going to be talking about an apologetics move, I guess. Some of my videos are related to apologetics, which was one of the first interests that I had when I was a Christian. But today we're going to talk about creation and how the creation manifests reflections of who God is. And that's just a part of what we're going to be talking about. And I'm going to try to keep this video maybe like 10 minutes or something. But I hope that this video can be a tool for you to look towards apologetics not as a system, but as a way that we can creatively think about how to reach other people with God's joy, God's reality, and God's truth. And I guess those last two are kind of a part of the same thing. But because, I think that apologetics takes intelligence and smarts, but what about those of us, like myself, who aren't like the most super intelligent people, but maybe we have a creative side to us? There's a way to creatively, God put creativity into people, and that's one of the arguments for his existence, actually. And so in Romans chapter 1, Paul talks about the imprint of God in his creation, and that people can clearly see who God is through his attributes. His visible attributes show who he is. And so people are without excuse, even though they think they have an excuse. They say, God, show me another sign, or why doesn't God come and show himself? If God peeled back the sky like the screen and showed himself, then I would believe. They were saying the same thing to Jesus when he was in the world, right? Jesus, why don't you give us another sign? And Jesus says, a wicked and adulterous generation asks for a sign, but no sign will be given to them except the sign of Jonah. Because Jonah, when you know the story of Jonah, he was swallowed by the fish. A lot of people don't believe that story, that happened. I think it happened. But he was swallowed by the fish and then carried back to where he went. He was a wayward prophet who wanted to escape from the will of God, but you can't escape the will of God any more than you can escape Earth. Well, maybe we're going to be able to do that. But anyways, you got to think about, like, creation is a glorious thing, but it's not the ultimate manifestation of God's glory, right? But it does reflect his glory. And I was just thinking a little bit about narcissism, and not like what we modernly define as narcissism, because today the world is kind of just like everything else. The culture's redefined narcissism to mean almost like anybody who thinks for themselves and tries to, like, go past what is kind of given to us by the state, the prepackaged explanations for things. And when you say, like, nah, I don't think that's true, you're considered like a narcissist. Or when you call out hypocrisy, right? Like, that's considered narcissism. But narcissism, in the ancient mythological sense, it had to do with being trapped by one's own reflection. And so if you think about that in the instance of, like, what we make, having pieces of us, pieces of our being in us. Like, for example, there's a book here. Actually, I'm going to do this book so I can plug my own book. So this book took me time to write. Big American Problems. It took me a lot of time to write, and a lot of thought poured into that. So if you would want to buy that book, that'd be great. So I put time and effort into that book, and I put a lot of my thinking, my thoughts. Some of it probably is not perfect, but and it doesn't express myself perfectly. It doesn't express all dimensions of myself. But people who look into that book, they will see my own insight, and they will see things about who I am. So here's another book. This is a really good book too. This one is called the Bible, and the cover of that book is very worn out. But that's because I've used this book a lot, and God's been with me through a long time, and that book has helped me with a lot of wisdom. And in that book, God gives insight about who He is. And so, yes, you can glean certain pieces of who God is from looking at the creation, but you can also glean other things about what God feels, what He loves, how he sees history, that that according to the Bible emerged with underneath His sovereignty. Everything happened within what He created. And you can see that human history, that world history, from His perspective. And that's what the Bible will teach those things. And so it's a really good way to get more about who God is. But can you glean everything about God from looking at the mountains in the sky? Well, no. Well, what if you just lock yourself in the room with a Bible? Surely you could know everything about God then, right? Well, no. That's not all. These are pieces of who God is. And the Bible is not the exact representation of the image of God. But at the same time, it's a mystery, because He says that the Word of God is God. And so if we say that the Bible is the Word of God, well, then that is the exact representation of His being. And so I'm going to go back to like the things that we create having reflections of us, and every single thing that we make seems to have something about who we are attached to it. That's why you can walk into an ancient civilization and you can learn things about what that culture believed in. For example, we need to be able to see. And if I need to see something, what did I create in order to see? Well, I created a light. I can turn on the light, I can turn off the light, I can turn on the light, I can turn off the light. Right? And so that has a piece of a human being, which is the eyes. The eyes are the lamp of the body, right? And if our body is full of light, or if our eyes are full of light, our whole body will be good. Something like that. So we can see things that we create having reflections of us. Yet we can't become what we create. We can't synthesize ourselves in order to become something different than what we actually are. But we can put shadows or echoes or reflections of our own life. And yes, we can be trapped within those reflections. I've had it happen. God has blessed me with certain abilities, certain talents, and sometimes I have been trapped by my own ability to do things. And in Isaiah, it warns against worshiping what our own hands have made. And so this is all coming back full circle to the reason why, like, you can't deny God's existence, because God breathed life into people, and God created life from non-life. He raised us up from the dust of the earth, and He breathed into our nostril, and every breath we have, it signifies our life, that our heart is pumping. So God created the human machine, you might say, the human system, in the flesh. He made the flesh, but He also made the soul. He made the spirit, which, if we take those two things apart, we take the flesh away from the spirit, we take the spirit away from the flesh, we don't have life anymore. And so God gave us life. But even though He gave us life, there was still a pulling away from who God was. There was still a decay. Like, the thing is that in 2,000 years, this lamp is not going to work anymore. It's not. It's going to go out. But it might be an artifact from an ancient culture, an ancient time, in 2,000 years. Well, I think Jesus is going to come back before that. But anyways, 2,000 years, this lamp is not going to be putting out light. It's really unlikely. It'll probably be decomposed somewhere. And so eventually, Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroys. So the things we make for ourselves, they become our treasures. And then we treasure those things and we think that they're going to last forever, but they ultimately, they rust and they destroy, or they are destroyed. And in the same way, God's creation was subjected to frustration, it says in Romans 8.